On the morning of March 18th, 1925, farmers in southeast Missouri woke to an oddly warm day. The forecast called for rain and strong shifting winds, nothing unusual for late winter in the Ozarks. By nightfall, 695 people would be dead. What happened that Wednesday afternoon wasn't just the deadliest tornado in American history. It was a storm so powerful, so relentless, that it still defies explanation a century later. A tornado that traveled 219 miles across 3 states, that stayed on the ground for 3.5 hours, that moved at speeds up to 73 miles per hour, faster than most cars could drive on dirt roads in 1925. And nobody saw it coming. Not because people weren't paying attention, but because in 1925, meteorologists were legally forbidden from using the word tornado in weather forecasts. Let me explain. Since the 1880s, the United States Weather Bureau had maintained an official ban on tornado forecasting. The policy was simple: meteorologists could not predict tornadoes, and they could not even use the word tornado in any public forecast. The reasoning? Officials believed that tornado warnings would cause more panic than the tornadoes themselves. They thought the public couldn't handle the information. They worried telephone operators might abandon their posts if they had to relay storm warnings. So instead of warnings, the Weather Bureau issued vague forecasts. On the morning of March 18th, 1925, as conditions became ideal for severe weather, the official forecast called for rains and strong shifting winds. That was it. No warnings, no alerts, no preparation, just rains and strong shifting winds. Around 12:40 in the afternoon, something touched down northwest of Ellington, Missouri. Witnesses didn't describe it as a funnel cloud. They called it a smoky fog, a rolling mass of darkness, an amorphous cloud on the ground. It didn't look like what people thought a tornado was supposed to look like. Sam Flowers was riding his horse from his farm near Redford to the market town of Ellington that Wednesday. He had business to conduct. He hoped to make it home before the storms hit. Sam's horse came home shortly after dark. Without Sam, a search party found his body around 4 in the morning, 3 miles outside Ellington. He was the first victim of what would become known as the Tri-State Tornado, the first of 695. From Ellington, the tornado raced northeast. It hit the small town of Annapolis, destroying 90% of the buildings. 4 people died. The mining community of Leadana was next. The tornado destroyed the elevator machinery to the mine, trapping 75 miners 465 feet underground. They had to climb a 500-foot ladder to escape. The storm was moving fast. Calculations would later show it traveled at an average speed of 62 miles per hour across its entire path. At times, it hit 73 miles per hour. Between the time a letter carrier spotted the tornado near Ellington and the moment it struck Annapolis, only minutes had elapsed. People had no time to react. Alice Jones was a 10-year-old schoolgirl in Annapolis. Years later, she recalled the moment it hit, the children screaming and crying because they didn't know what was happening. Her mother and 2 younger brothers were at home. The tornado blew their house into the woods. They all survived, but they were injured. The tornado continued through Ballinger County, striking 2 rural schools and injuring 32 children. It scoured the ground so deeply near Sedgwickville that debris was found 50 miles away. A piece of straw was later discovered lodged in solid concrete. Sheets of iron flew through the air and landed in trees, where some remained for at least 70 years. By 2:25 in the afternoon, the tornado had crossed the Mississippi River into Illinois. What happened next was carnage on a scale America had never seen. The tornado hit the town of Gorham first. Every single building was either damaged or destroyed, the entire town. 37 people were killed. Over half the town's population died in minutes. Then came Murfreesboro. At 2:35 in the afternoon, traveling at 73 miles per hour, the tornado struck the northern part of the city. Murfreesboro was a prosperous mining town with about 11,000 residents. The tornado was nearly a mile wide when it hit. Witnesses described what they saw. The day had been dark and gloomy all morning. Heavy rain, then the drizzle increased. The heavens seemed to open. The day grew black. Then the air was filled with 10,000 things: boards, poles, cans, garments, stoves, whole sides of little frame houses. In some cases, the houses themselves were picked up and smashed to earth, and living beings too. A baby was blown from its mother's arms. A cow was picked up by the wind and hurled into the village restaurant. In Murfreesboro, 234 people died, 234 people in a single community. It remains the highest death toll from a tornado in any single American city in history. 623 people were injured in the immediate storm. But that wasn't the end of it. After the tornado passed, fires ignited throughout the rubble. With the water mains destroyed, there was no way to fight the flames. Survivors trapped in the wreckage burned alive. They tried using dynamite to create fire breaks, but it only caused more destruction. Of the 623 injured, 46 more died in the days that followed, bringing Murfreesboro's final death toll to 234. Three of the city's elementary schools were destroyed. The high school was heavily damaged when the top story blew away, killing 3 seniors. Longfellow School collapsed, killing 17 students. In total, 25 children died in Murfreesboro schools. One photograph from the aftermath shows a destroyed school building in Murfreesboro. On one of the walls, an electric bell clock is stopped at about 2:35, the exact time the tornado arrived. 40% of the buildings in Murfreesboro were either damaged or destroyed. The tornado didn't stop. It moved northeast toward DeSoto, a village of about 700 people. The town was virtually obliterated. 69 people died, 1 out of every 9 residents. The greatest tragedy in DeSoto happened at the school. It was still in session when the tornado hit. The building partially collapsed. 33 children were killed, 33 children in a single school. It remains the worst tornadic death toll at any school in United States history. To this day, that record has never been broken. Among those killed in DeSoto was Deputy Sheriff George Boland. He was on patrol when the storm struck. The tornado lifted him from the ground. He disappeared into the funnel. His body was never found. Between Gorham, Murfreesboro, and DeSoto, the tornado killed 541 people in 40 minutes. It continued through Jackson County, then entered Franklin County. The mining town of West Frankfort lay directly in its path. The tornado struck the northwest side of town, hitting densely populated neighborhoods and mining operations. At the Peabody Mine 18 in Caldwell, an 80-foot coal tipple weighing several hundred tons was blown over and rolled by the wind. 148 people died in West Frankfort. More than 500 homes were destroyed. At the Old Bend coal mine in West Frankfort, a barograph recorded the lowest pressure measurement, 28.87 inches of mercury. The atmospheric pressure inside the tornado was so low that buildings literally exploded from the pressure differential. The tornado moved through rural Hamilton and White counties, killing 45 more people. Another 140 were injured, 20 of whom later died from their wounds. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, after more than 3 hours on the ground, the tornado crossed the Wabash River into Indiana. It struck the small town of Griffin immediately. Every single structure was touched by the storm. Many were completely swept away. Not a single building was left untouched. The entire town was destroyed. Survivors confronted destruction so complete that some could only guess where they had once lived. The search for family and friends had a special hellishness. Fires flickered over the ruins. The injured wandered about in a daze, mud so thoroughly embedded in their skin that identification was nearly impossible. In Griffin, 46 people died. Another 202 were injured. One resident later reported that he grabbed a door handle during the tornado. The house blew away, leaving him standing there holding just the door handle. Some witnesses in Griffin said that one row of houses was still standing as the tornado left town. Then a smaller tornado came out of the back of the main funnel and took those houses down too. The tornado grazed Owensville, killing 9 more people on farmsteads and in rural areas. About 85 farms between Griffin and Princeton were devastated. In Princeton, a factory town with about 8,000 people, residents on the north side saw a blackness move across the southern half of town. Nobody in North Princeton knew or even guessed that the south side had been destroyed until bodies and injured people started arriving at the hospital. The tornado hit a Heinz factory. Large sections of neighborhoods were leveled. 38 people died in the immediate storm, with another 6 dying from their injuries later. 152 people were injured. Then finally, the tornado began to weaken. It took a more northeasterly direction and dissipated around 4:30 in the afternoon, about 3 miles southwest of Petersburg, Indiana. Total time on the ground, 3 hours and 30 minutes. Total distance traveled, 219 miles. Total deaths, 695 people. Total injuries, 2,027. Total homes destroyed, 15,000. Winds estimated at 300 miles per hour, with at times up to 1 mile. Average speed 62 miles per hour, peak speed 73 miles per hour. These numbers still stand as records. The longest track tornado in American history, the deadliest tornado in American history, one of the fastest tornadoes ever recorded, and it happened before anyone could warn a single person. One survivor, Betty Maroney, was 7 years old and in class in DeSoto when it hit. In an interview decades later, she recalled the moment, the teacher telling the girls to take their seats and the boys to close the windows. Then it was over. She was lying on a pile of bricks. She climbed out of the rubble and ran into a business owner on the street. "Mr. Tippy, did the world come to an end?" she asked. He said, "No, we had a tornado." "What's a tornado?" she asked. She had never heard the word before. In the aftermath, the destruction was apocalyptic. Railroad workers, led by a physician from Iowa, pulled a train directly into the demolished village of Parrish. They loaded the dead, injured, and dying beyond capacity and transported them to the hospital in Benton. Relief came from nearby towns. The American Red Cross mobilized. The Indiana National Guard deployed. Neighboring communities provided food, temporary housing, and medicine. But heavy rains followed the tornado. The Wabash River flooded. By March 23rd, the only way to reach Griffin was by boat or railroad. The final victim of the tri-state tornado was Gervais Burgess, a 46-year-old coal miner from West Frankfort. He died on January 3rd, 1926, nearly 10 months after the storm, from injuries he sustained that day. Approximately one-third of the tornado's victims were children. Counting those returning home from school and those who died in schools, the toll was 72 students. 57 schools across 3 states were damaged or destroyed. Property damage was estimated at $16.5 million in 1925. Adjusted for inflation and population growth, that's approximately $2.9 billion today. More than 600 of the 695 deaths occurred in Illinois. 12 died in Missouri. At least 71 died in Indiana. Fires, looting, and theft in the tornado's aftermath compounded the tragedy. The storm changed how Americans thought about tornadoes. Before 1925, tornadoes were often described as acts of God, divine punishment. After the tri-state tornado, multiple ministers stated publicly that this was not God's punishment. One minister from Illinois said it was not God who hurt Murfreesboro's babies. But the tragedy did not immediately change the Weather Bureau's policy. They continued to avoid emergency predictions. The ban on the word tornado remained in effect until 1950. 25 years after the deadliest tornado in American history, meteorologists were still forbidden from warning people. During those 25 years, over 10,000 Americans were killed by tornadoes. The ban was finally lifted after World War II, when 2 Air Force meteorologists successfully predicted a tornado at Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma. Their forecast proved that tornado prediction was possible. The military demanded better warnings to protect valuable infrastructure. In 1950, the word tornado was finally allowed in forecasts. In 1971, meteorologist Ted Fujita retroactively rated the tri-state tornado as an F5, the highest rating on the Fujita scale. Today, the National Weather Service can issue tornado warnings with an average lead time of nearly 20 minutes for major tornadoes. The probability of detecting a tornado averages about 95%. Doppler radar, satellite imaging, emergency broadcast systems, and mobile phones allow warnings to reach millions of people in seconds. If the tri-state tornado happened today, the Storm Prediction Center would likely issue a high-risk outlook. Tornado watches would be issued around noon. As the storm developed, tornado warnings would be broadcast across the region. People would take shelter. The death toll would not be 695. But the question remains, could a tornado like this happen again? Meteorologically, yes. The atmospheric conditions that created the tri-state tornado were extreme but not impossible. The convergence of a cold front, warm front, and dry line at a triple point. Warm, moist air from the Gulf meeting, cold, dry air from Canada. Wind shear, instability, low pressure. These conditions still occur. On December 10th, 2021, another extremely long-track tornado tore through Kentucky, traveling over 165 miles. Meteorologists call it the modern-day tri-state tornado. It killed 57 people. Hundreds more were injured, but it happened with warnings, with radar, with alerts sent to every phone in the storm's path. In 1925, there were none of these things. The tri-state tornado remains unmatched not just because of its power, but because of its timing. It struck at the perfect moment to cause maximum devastation, during school hours, during work hours, in the middle of the day when towns were full of people. moving so fast that even if someone saw it coming, they couldn't outrun it. And in an era when the government had decided that telling people about tornadoes would do more harm than the tornadoes themselves. 695 people died, proving that policy wrong. The towns affected by the tri state tornado rebuilt, Murfreesboro reconstructed, West Frankfort recovered. Griffin was slowly rebuilt, though some communities like Gorham and Parrish never fully recovered to their former populations. Survivors carried the trauma for the rest of their lives. One woman interviewed in the 1990s, who was a child during the tornado, remembered her father building a storm cellar immediately after. For 2 or 3 years, every time the wind came up, every time lightning struck, he woke the children in the middle of the night and made them go to the cellar. Eventually, she said, she stopped being afraid of storms, but the memories remained vivid. Survivors interviewed 70 years later could still describe it in perfect detail. They would say the same thing over and over. It was like this. It was dark and it was light. Then it was over. The tri state tornado stands alone in American history. The deadliest, the longest tracked, one of the most powerful. A storm that killed nearly 700 people in 3.5 hours. A storm that nobody was allowed to warn anyone about. And a reminder that sometimes the deadliest disasters aren't just acts of nature, they're failures of policy, failures of judgment, failures to trust people with information that could save their lives. March 18th, 1925. A date that should never be forgotten. Thank you for watching this story. If you enjoyed learning something new today, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment telling us what you thought of this story.